What's up guys, I am pumped today for this video because I finally get to show you guys the second or maybe third generation 50 watt EVH 5153. This is the 6L6 non-stealth version, which I've been told it has a bit better of a blue channel at the expense of maybe not being quite as tight or aggressive on the red channel, but honestly, they all kind of sound really similar to me from the clips I've heard, and this is just a tad bit cheaper than the stealth. I'm sure there's a lot more nuance with the sounds when you're in the room with the amps, but from what I've heard online, I feel like the non-stealth version is more geared towards the type of music that I play. All right, so I've got the Lizzy Hale Explorer here. It's going into the Chase Bliss Brothers AM pedal, into the amp, into the Splawn 412 in the closet, and I will go through some quick sounds here, and then we will talk about the amp a little bit more after that. And as usual, there are timestamps down below so you can jump to whatever part of the video you want. Okay, so hopefully you guys have a decent idea of all the different types of sounds of non-death metal type stuff that this amp can dish up. Now, before I get going here, I have got the guys at Zzounds to thank for sending me this amp to try out for a little while, to take it on the stage, to see how this thing performs in a real gigging musician's environment, and then bring it back here into the studio to show you guys. As always, if you enjoy the content, hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already to help my channel grow and to get these videos out there to more new viewers. All right, let's talk a little bit about this amp. Now, this and the bigger 100-watt brother, they've been around for quite a while now, and I assume that most of you know kind of the ins and outs of these amps, but if not, here we go. This is a 3-channel amp, kind of like more like 2.5 channels. The crunch and the clean channel, they share an EQ here, but they each have their own separate control on these dual stack potentiometers here for volume and gain, and that lets you dial in exactly how much gain you want on each channel and balance the output so that one's not dramatically louder than the other, which can happen in amps that share a gain control or a volume control for 2 channels like that. The lead channel, it obviously has its own EQ and volume and its own three-band EQ here. There is a global presence control here that each channel shares. There is also a global resonance or depth control on the back of the amp, which is set to the noon position. And there's a foot switch jack, a effects loop. You've got a direct line out, preamp out for DI recording or sending that into your own impulse response loader if you want to have a DI sound on stage or in the studio. And it's also able to be controlled by MIDI, so that's always a plus if you've got a MIDI setup that you would like to incorporate something like this into. Realistically, the only feature that I feel like might benefit some players is a 25-watt setting. Most amps like this, you usually have sort of like a full power or half power switch that you can kind of cut the volume if you need a little bit of a little bit of a chill out mode on stage, or if you have a cabinet that isn't 50 watts, like if you've got a single greenback cabinet on stage that you want to use. Obviously a 50-watt amp could potentially damage that cabinet, so if you do have something like that, being able to flip down to a half power, maybe 25 or 30 watts, that'd be a much safer option if you do have something like that. But that's kind of like an edge case scenario, so I give the amp a pass, but it's something like that would have been nice to have on the amp. Honestly, the amp is really one of the most impressive amps that I've used both here in the studio and on the stage, so let's get into that in the post-gig report. Okay, so I used this a couple of weeks ago at a show, and I had a great time with the amp on stage. Despite the fact that this amp's structure and voice does lean a bit harder into the higher gain sounds, I found that the blue channel with Just like the full-size 5153, the blue channel can easily cover just about everything that our band does. I mean, you heard there when I was playing, I was able to easily roll back the volume on the blue channel and almost get completely clean and then quickly transition back over into the high gain sound. And also, as you heard, with these dual drive pedals, I was able to get a sort of like a mild push to the sound and then a much higher gain push to the sound with the pedal. So effectively, that gave me a clean, a good kind of heavy crunch sound, a boosted crunch sound, and then a high gain crunch sound. So 4 very usable sounds on one channel. And that's kind of how I rolled with both the 100 watt version and the 50 watt version on stage. I feel like boosting the blue channel to a really high gain sound, it sort of retains a little bit of that smoothness to the top end and a little bit more full of a mid-range that the blue channel has compared to the red channel. And you can get just as much saturation out of the blue channel with a drive pedal. And for me personally, I felt like the blue channel with a drive boosted to the same saturation level as what I had the red channel, it just sounded and felt a little bit better than the red channel. Now at 50 watts, this amp has plenty of power for great stage sounds, and the cleans were nice and big, and they had a ton of headroom, so 0 complaints in terms of just raw power on the stage. And I also like the fact that the smaller footprint of the amp, kind of compared to the big brother, it nicely fits onto a 112 cab or a vertical 212 cab without kind of like awkwardly hanging over the sides. So yeah, despite the blue channel on this amp working absolutely great for a lot of our songs, you can absolutely tell that the amp is just begging to be pushed a lot harder. And unless you're going after kind of like studio accuracy, playing these non-metal cover songs that slightly more aggressive structure that the blue channel has, it still works with the amp, and it didn't feel like it was fighting me to do something that it didn't want to do, which I have had some high gain amps on stage. They've kind of pushed back in terms of like, I'm doing this low gain thing, but it kind of feels like I've choked down a high gain sound to get there. And this amp sounds a lot more natural in terms of doing the low gain thing. And it's very impressive that it can pull that off while still also being able to be so accomplished with the very high gain stuff. So yeah, overall very impressed with this amp, and I know I do have the Victory Kraken, and I do know that that's a very comparable amp in terms of the sound, kind of like the sounds and the styles that most owners will play compared to this. And it's also sort of around the same price. I think that the Victory stuff kind of got tariffed recently, and the prices have gone up a little bit. These seem to have stayed around the same price, so that's nice. But I am going to be doing a comparison video between this and the Kraken, so definitely stay tuned for that. It's very interesting to hear how both of the amps go about getting sort of the same types of sounds in their own unique ways. So it was a lot of fun just kind of doing like some initial testing with that. So that'll be a fun video, so definitely stay tuned for that. Overall though, I really enjoyed my time with this, and I had a great time on stage. It sounds awesome here in the studio, just absolutely ripping amp, and takes boost pedals very well too, like you heard. It's not really much to complain about. I mean, especially at the price point, the $14-ish $100 price point for this version is very competitive, given the features and all the different sounds that you can get out of the amp. And yeah, just overall, A+. I give this one an A+. I really enjoyed this. Anyways, if you guys want to grab one of these, I will have an affiliate link to Zzounds' website down there in the video description for this, the guitar, everything else that I used to help make this video happen. All right, so I've played the 100 watt version, I've played the 50 watt version, and now the updated 50 watt version, and there's one left, the baby, the LBX. I think they make 2 different versions. One has the clean channel and the blue channel, and the other one has the clean channel and the red channel. And I think I would probably get along the best with the blue channel version. So if I do review the LBX, it'll be the non-stealth version with the green and the blue channel. So yeah, if you guys want to hear my take on that, definitely let me know down in the comments below. And I've got a ton of awesome captures of this amp for both the Quad Cortex and the Nano Cortex and the Tone X, and All 3 channels, boosted, unboosted, Marshall Vintage 30 cabinet, greenback cabinet, DI capture so that you can use your own IRs. There's really something for everyone, and if you're not in the market for an amp right now, but you do have one of those platforms and you want all of the sounds that this thing has for far less money, my email address is down in the video description down there. Hit me up and I will get you hooked up. Okay guys, one big last thanks to Zzounds for letting me borrow this thing to show you guys, and a big thanks to all of you for hanging out with me today, and I will see you in the next video. Take care, bye.